Hello, and welcome to a Bon Mott's production of
MOTSterpiece Theater,
where we review critically acclaimed cinema spanning the breadth of human filmmaking.
MOTSterpiece Theater.
Spoilers, mature content, inappropriate language. Join us.
MOTSterpiece Theater. MOTSterpiece Theater.
And welcome to a special holiday episode of MOTSterpiece Theater with It's a Wonderful Life, number 20 on the AFI Top 100 list. I'm Jonathan E. Manser, here with Stephen Ramosi.
Hello.
And Scott Thurlow.
It's a wonder fuck life, and I'm going to tell you why. Merry Christmas, by the way.
And a Happy New Year. Anyway, Scott, would you like to start us off with a funny log line?
Yes, before I do this, I'll just give my caveat before we discuss the movie at large. I despise this movie a lot, and you may about to be hearing why. So my log line, therefore, with that in mind, my log line is Norman Rockwell's All-American Christmas Bullshit Special.
Well, it does feature Jimmy Stewart.
Yeah.
So I will give the actual synopsis in what is the inspiration for Bernie Sanders' revolution. This is a story of a young man growing up in America as he slowly realizes that all of his dreams are less important than running a small town bank through the Great Depression and World War II. And as misery upon travesty beset him, he goes to commit suicide only to be saved by angels and the local townsfolk. So, without further ado, I will go into the introduction. It starts off with angels getting together to discuss how they need to save this hero and of mankind, this noble individual named George Bailey, who's about to do something very tragic. And they give the angel tasked to save him, whose name is Clarence, a kind of slideshow of the great moments of George Bailey. And this movie was made in 1946. So it has the sensibilities of the 1946, which aren't my sensibilities. It has the whimsy of musicals without being a musical.
Yeah, I like that description, yeah.
And, I mean, you're seeing that George Bailey is kind of this selfless individual throughout his life. He loses his hearing in one ear, saving his younger brother who fell through the ice. He works as a youth and ends up helping the drugstore owner who's his boss.
Drunken drugstore guy.
While making the medication, ends up instead accidentally taking out this big bottle with poison written on it and filling.
It's an honest mistake, dude. Anybody can make that mistake.
And you watch him go through like high school and fall in love, or though it's more of this woman named Mary kind of falls in love with him. And, he wants to go off to college.
Be an engineer, I believe, something like that.
Build architect,
things.
Actually.
Yeah.
But events keep happening that he must stay in this town. What's the town's name?
Bedford Falls.
So, you're just following George's life. But there's this man named Mr. Potter who miraculously never ages. He's always just...
I'm going to speak about that later on, but nobody fucking ages.
They actually lampshade it in this one line.
All right.
But he's Mr. Scrooge. Exactly that type of character. And he wants to destroy the Bailey Savings and Loan.
He just wants to own everything in town, including that, sure.
And basically, it's a lot of hokiness. It's a lot of Jimmy Stewart being, oh gosh.
Oh, gee willikers, I guess I'll have to stay in town and save it.
If these are the highlights of George Bailey's life, then I imagine the rest of it is him like slipping on banana peels everywhere else. And I don't know, there's just so much saccharine charm in the introduction.
I would say saccharine is accurate.
Or attempted charm, I would say. And I understand why they're doing it, because it's supposed to be highlight the fact that his youth is spent to be like kind of carefree, and then life takes courses you're not planned. But it still comes across, especially in 2016 sensibilities, to be a little bit, I don't know.
Sappy.
Yes.
To be kind, I'll use worse words later, but I'll start off with that one.
But that's I think that's the intro. When does the introduction come
Well,
off?
I would say that when
Yeah.
he finally, George Bailey's all excited, I'm finally get out of this crummy town and I'm going to do something with my life. And then his father owns a savings and loan and passes away. So he becomes a shareholder, a board member or something. But Mr. Potter wants to snatch it up, but the board decides they won't sell it to him as long as George stays on to take the job. So he's basically forced into the family business, and that's what keeps him in town the whole time.
What's the line from one of the Godfathers? I keep trying to get out, and they keep dragging me back in.
They keep bringing me back in. Sure.
I would have actually liked to sing The Godfather with Jimmy Stewart.
That surely would be amusing. It's probably a better movie than this one, but go on.
That's all I have to say.
I just want to point out one thing that I've always hated, or at least when I was old enough to start hating things like this, that it opens literally, the movie presupposes that God and angels exist and enact divine intervention in people's lives. So, like, you have to, like, just accept that's what's happening. And I was like, fuck you. I've always been like, fuck you about that. But anyway, so yeah, that's about what happens in the intro, though.
Yeah, it does open on a conversation between God and Clarence as stars.
And Joseph.
And Joseph, sorry. Oh, yeah, it might not even be God, I guess.
I think, God never says anything. I think they're speaking to him.
Yeah.
And then Joseph sort of just interprets whatever. It doesn't really matter, but it does open with supernatural beings, if you will.
Yeah.
That exist and are going to intervene in this schlub's life because he's going to commit suicide.
I don't know what to think about this introduction because when I saw this movie as a kid, I used to watch it around, holiday times with my parents and stuff.
I used to watch it on the 4th of July. Like, I'm just kidding you, but this movie, of course, is about Christmas.
No,
and
but
it's shown during Christmas season.
That's not even what's important though. Like, really, when I saw it when I was a kid, I liked it, but that doesn't mean, like, now that I see it now, I'm like, oh god, this movie is interminable and just isn't that good. So, like, I wasn't that drawn in by the intro. I think for what the rest of the movie is, I think the intro does a fine job, I guess, setting up the events that are going to happen. But it's not like if I saw the first 20 minutes of this movie, I'd be like, I definitely have to watch the rest of this.
Sure.
You know?
See, I don't know if it's satisfactory for setting up the events, but I don't know if it's necessary the way they went about doing it. And especially, again, granted, I always try to view these films in their time and place.
Sure. As objectively and professionally, academically as possible.
But it actually did feel like a bad musical with the way of over-exaggeration of certain things. Or like when they would have a kind of a humorous scene and all the humor would derive from someone who happened to be like overlooking on like a porch and like giving wild-eyed expressions or frustrations.
Real quick, I think the best example of that is there's a scene when George goes to his brother's high school graduation party at the high school, and then apparently he designed a pool underneath the the dance floor, and like it's a prank, like let's push the button, make the pool come up, and they're playing Charleston, whatever. So it becomes like a ridiculously farcical musical comedy scene at that point. Sure.
Yeah.
And I've never been a fan of those.
Me neither.
So I can't with full. I just again, maybe this will appeal to you. The introduction, it didn't for me, and so I'm gonna have to give it a soft 0.
I would say as my caveat, yeah. This I remember like this movie being on wherever I was in Christmas time when I was growing up as a kid, but I always remember like it was boring to me even then. So it started off boring, like I never was enthralled by it. Then it became offensive, and now I just hate it so very much.
Yeah.
So, like, but again, like you said, attempting to view it in quotes objectively and narratively, it's an okay setup, but it isn't the most enthralling thing in the world. And yeah, a lot of the sensibilities about it, if they ever had any like connection to people, like certainly not to me. So I may give it just a bland 0 because that's what it has always been to me.
Yeah, I agree. The setup is trying to show the things.
And I'm sorry, and still is, to be clear. Go ahead.
Yeah, the setup is trying to foreshadow the things that are going to happen. And I still don't understand, I guess, what George's motivation is, because he's always been this same guy. He doesn't actually have, his only arc is to be disappointed over and over again until the end of the movie, where his motivation is I have a great life, but it's been completely disappointing the entire time.
His motivation is to try to get out of this small town that's stifling him, but he just never does. And sure, I kind of agree what you're saying. I'm just saying that's what always got out. That's what he wanted, but never gets.
To actually answer you, Steve, on the academic point of this. Remember when we did the camp article on autobiographical self? And
check out that episode.
On the offensive narratology. It was talking about how a lot of the early kind of stories were about destiny, like who you were supposed to be, regardless of what you're. So I believe that and Christianity has a lot of predeterminism to it.
Yeah.
So I feel that this is a very much like deterministic. George Bailey was always supposed to be this. He was trying to escape his fate throughout his entire youth, and the woman he meets his future wife when they're children, and she whispers to him in his
trick ear.
That ear.
What? That's my trick ear there. Can't hear that you love me.
But like everything is foreshadowed to the point of even that there's fate involved with this and
destiny. Yes.
Sure.
No escaping
but
that
then
from me.
I don't want to rabbit hole us, but here's my issue with it, of course. If you take that all to be like sort of generally contained in the movie, that means then God and angels have to intervene to force you to get back on your fate.
Yes.
Well,
so anyway,
we'll get to that in themes.
So regardless,
zero.
I think it's zero. I just have one more thing to add. I should love a movie that starts off with a guy who wants to commit suicide, but this movie ruins even that for me.
Anyway, onto the body with Stephen.
So the body is a lot of just George being a swell guy and basically sacrificing his own happiness for everyone else.
Bit. Yeah.
He gives away his chance to go off and see the world because his father dies and he needs to stay and watch out for the building and loan or whatever. And then his brother comes back and is supposed to take over the business while he goes off to school, but his brother gets a good job and he goes and takes that good job. And then George gets married and he's supposed to go off on this awesome honeymoon, but he has to spend all his money.
The depression is hitting at that time.
Saving people and bailing people out.
That's why he's called George Bailey.
And just over and over again, it's just him being like, I can't leave. Everyone's dependent on me.
Yeah.
And,
exactly.
And that's pretty much the entire, I mean, that's it. Like, it's just a bunch of scenes of him sacrificing his own happiness for everyone else in town until saving up all his goodwill until that one moment when he's about to kill himself and everybody's like, hey, now that we've driven you to suicide, maybe we can save you this time.
You parasites have taken everything from me.
But I mean, that's pretty much it. That's a lot of what happens in the body. You know, there's these little moments of like, I don't know, humanity, I guess, or whatever. These little moments where he has like these interactions with people throughout the town. It's basically just showing him building up all this goodwill.
Sure. He's a friendly dude and people rely on him.
And then
he helps
guess,
them out.
So would you say the body ends with him jumping off the bridge to save Clarence?
No, I mean,
before that.
That's fine. I would say it might be a little bit before, right when, so his uncle, Billy, I believe, George's uncle.
Oh, when I actually agree with this.
Is supposed to go to the bank and like deposit the money from the savings loan so like they have it, their account is still live and active. And
one of the buffoons that George has been saving this entire time.
One of the random townsfolk idiots who is everyone in this town, I guess, except George to a lesser extent. Anyway, he loses his deposit money and therefore Mr. Potter finally that's his chance to finally snatch up the building savings and loan that he's always wanted. And he tells George like, goes to him begging for help or begging him not to do it. And he's like, well, I got my life insurance policy. The collateral was $500, but it's $15,000. So Potter goes, you're worth more dead than alive. So especially that's where I call it once he hears that and leaves the office at that point.
Yeah.
And then he's on the bridge. It's basically not that big of a difference, but that's where I was going to call it.
George is supposed to be a swell guy. It came off to me that he's both prideful and impulsive.
I agree. He's kind of a dick at a lot of points.
He's a dick to women. He's a dick to his
terrible to women.
Potter offers him a very good job with a great pay and a chance to travel the world, to take care of his family. And he, in a way, could be interpreted as him sacrificing for the good of the people and of sacrificing his family to be the hero in a way. Like
he's going to sell out, but no, I'll never sell out. Fuck you, Potter.
and like again, he loses $800 or $8,000, which was a tremendous amount of money back in the 40s. First order of business: kill myself. Like
no, that's not true. He goes to Potter first.
Yeah,
and tries to get a loan.
It seems like 2 scenes, and then the night of losing that money. Only solution I have is to murder myself.
He's in a bar and then jumps off a bridge.
To die the sacrificial hero. I'll go more into this in the protagonist, but like I really started to dislike George based on his choices throughout this, which always seem to be self-sacrificial, but may not be upon further analysis. I think Freud would have a lot to say about
He
it.
sure would. No, I mean, I largely agree. So the thing is, like, it's sort of weird because you talked all about George there, which technically is the protagonist, or at least I would say largely one of the. But since it focuses so much on him throughout this entire thing, and especially the body, and just him bumbling around, if not necessarily bumbling, being there, held in town, doing what he needs to do, and giving up little things bit by bit for his own happiness in his own little personal life. But I still have never given a shit, and didn't this time either. And yes, like I said, my opinion is already very much biased, but nevertheless, trying to view it narratively.
I'm going to say that I enjoyed the body much more than I enjoyed the introduction, because it starts to go into, in a way, the adult aspects. So they get rid of like the kind of musical humor that the intro was so like
heavily laden with. Yeah.
In this one, they're dealing with the depression. They're dealing and the ramifications of that. The run on the banks. They're dealing with World War II. George can't go because of his bad ear. But they're showing the women going into the service to help produce things. They're showing him trying to raise. I thought that it was done like as a slice of life during the 40s. I thought it was done very well. At least showing you kind of like almost and what Forrest Gump would later do, even though I hate that movie, better with showing all this. Like they kind of did
this is an early Forrest Gump. That's really funny. I don't know if you intended that, but now I can't get that escape out of my thought now. But
it's kind of a more microscopic version of that, all based in one town.
Yeah.
So I kind of respect it for that.
I guess. I don't know. I don't have much more to add. I'm going to give it maybe a soft 0. There's nothing particularly wrong, but it's just kind of boring. And the meandering, it can get meandering, I'll definitely say. So I don't know.
Yeah, to me, I'm gonna give it a 0 as well. To me, the body is just kind of the same thing, like 4 times.
yeah, that's
like
well
treading
said.
Water until the conclusion.
Exactly.
So yeah, I'm gonna give it a 0 as well.
I'm going to give it a soft 1 based upon all the points I just made.
Okay.
So it's on a conclusion with Scott.
Yeah, so either way you call it, whether it's when he loses the money, he goes to Mr. Potter for help and refuses and is told that his life insurance policy would pay off if he kills himself, and goes to a bar, commiserates with his bar buddies, the guy who owns the bar, whatever his name is, and then, decides to go to the one bridge in town high enough that he can jump into the river and kill himself, and that's when the his guardian angel, Clarence, shows up, jumps into the river first, callbacking the original scene with his brother. George jumps in to save him. And then the famous thing where he goes, "Oh, I wish I'd never been born." And Clarence tries to convince him that he's an angel, and he just thinks, because George has been drinking, he just thinks he's kind of another crazy old coot. And then Clarence grants his wish, and he sees. Then we sort of have a Back to the Future 2 moment where the town becomes Pottersville, and see, now here's my point. I'm going to bring it up here. I think I would like to live in Pottersville. It seems like a rockin' town. It's got like jazz joints and gin joints and whatever. Sure, it's run by Potter and it's own maybe like sort of corrupt, but either way, and nobody recognizes him, of course, because he's, in quotes, it's like the literal genie thing. You've never been born, so no one knows you. So he sees how, like, I guess terrible people's lives have become because he didn't save the druggist guy. His brother died in the war or something. Something bad happened to everybody.
His brother died in the beginning when he fell into
and then never went to the war. So then people he saved then died. All this crap, So finally,
bullshit.
all this Americana saccharine sappy bullshit, like I said earlier. And then finally decides, no, I want to live again, please. So then he does. Then Clarence grants that wish, and even though he ostensibly is going to jail for not having the money in the account, thus committing fraud or whatever he's going to be charged with via Potter, and he decides, life is wonderful after all, and thank God. And as he is realizing this, then everyone in the town, of course, shows up and bails him out with like little dollars at a time, raises enough money to bail him out. And I guess the little side thing with every time a bell rings, the angel gets his wings, so Clarence finally gets his wings, and those stupid bell rings over the Christmas tree, and we're all happy in Americana, and life is safe and great and beautiful, and nothing bad ever happens.
For now.
Yeah, like I said.
So here's the one thing. Potter just straight up steals $8,000 from him.
Yes.
Just $8,000 richer. They never go back to that or talk about it again. The other thing is, does him getting money from the townspeople mean that he didn't commit fraud?
I don't know.
Embezzlement.
The movie doesn't want you to think about that. They want you to think about everything I just said,
right?
and we'll go
if you
into
get
the
that
themes.
money, it still means that other $8,000 is still missing.
Excuse me. the Christmas spirit convinced
Yeah. The power of Christmas compels you
not,
to.
not only the
Exactly.
bank auditor to pitch in his own money, which will never happen in real life,
Yeah.
suspension of disbelief,
Exactly.
broken. But also the cop tears up a ticket, which will never happen in real life. So
Exactly. Sure. Like I said, yeah, that's what it wants you to get out of it. And of course, you can see, if not humorous things, like legitimate things like that, which I know we'll discuss in themes very shortly. So I don't know. Again, like it's so weak and lame, and because again, I understand the sensibilities and so forth, and what it's trying to, the sentiment, if you will, it's trying to impart to you. But I don't care, and I don't buy into it.
Look, if you believe in America, everything will be all right.
And if God exists and divine intervenes in your life, I suppose too.
Well, if you believe in America, God exists.
Yeah, well, I believe in one, but not the other, I guess we'll say. I believe that America exists, I'll say.
see, I'm really, really torn about the conclusion. Oh, first of all, you guys remember Beavis and Butthead?
I sure
yes,
do.
but not anything specifically.
There was an episode, a Christmas episode of it,
when they did this.
where one of the two they show him what it would be like if he never was born. Everyone's life is better.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, 1,000 things have parodied this. This is an emotional, gripping scene, like because it's
Well, it wants it to be, but go on.
it is because even I was like the combination of music and the setup that they do. The problem is I don't buy into this narrative, but I still was like, yeah, you go, George, at the end of this, which I'm now think they're manipulating me using
Of course.
film techniques more so than having a strong story. Now, this is the first time I've seen it in maybe a decade or more, and I was kind of angry upon reflection
Yeah.
of the ending. I'm
This
like,
movie wants to manipulate you.
I feel like I was been bamboozled.
Yeah.
That's almost exactly what I was going to say, is kind of the style of this scene had me at some points like with a little bit of a slight grin on my face, but as soon as I realized what was happening and what was going on and how much bullshit it was,
Yes.
it kind of took me right out of it again.
Well, yeah, that's style, which sure we can speak about, but narratively wise, in
Right.
terms of conclusion.
Yeah, you actually get, I'm going to give a 1 to style now.
Yeah, I
For
was always going to.
For that bamboozlement,
Yes.
but I can't because it's such a false ending. That
Right.
It's a caricature of Americana.
Right.
There's another
It's
description I
complete
had.
bullshit. It's if you have enough belief and if you do the right thing for long enough, the right thing will be done to you without any
Consequence. Yes.
explanation as to really why.
Yeah.
Like the town has been screwing him over for the last however many years, 20 years or 30 years or whatever.
I can't tell because
Perhaps
nobody fucking ages
like
in this movie.
everybody loves him, but it's just because he saves them so often. And then at the end, they're like, I have all of our money. I guess it's supposed to be post-World War II,
Yeah.
and everybody has some money at that point, so they can afford to give some of it up or whatever.
But not this town shouldn't anyway. I don't want to I think we should be done talking about conclusion. Like,
Yeah,
this is
that's
all kind of
fine.
thematic stuff.
I'm
giving it a 0.
Yeah.
Yeah, 0. So I was going to initially give this a 1, but you guys convinced me on a 0. So on to themes with me.
Sleeves are literally being rolled here.
Okay, so I have 2 major themes that I want to discuss here. The first being, forget The Big Short. This movie discusses why the American economy will collapse
Hell or high water.
50 to 60 years ahead of when it was made. So you have a bank that's giving out bad mortgages
To people who can't
pay
afford
them
it. Yeah.
You get bailed out by the taxpayer money. Meanwhile, the fat cats from Wall Street to Pottersville are raking in all the dough, taking their bonuses that they obtained illegally, $8,000, and no charges pressed. They got congressmen on their back pocket. This is the most infuriating movie economically I've seen in a very, very long time.
Yes, that is all. I don't disagree with any of that. It's just that we see it now because of the times we live in which we've grown up. Of course, the movie itself at the time nobody, very few people, I imagine, audiences noticed that and thought that about it. But now that we can see that, it becomes sort of darker and it can become a theme. I don't think, of course, the movie wanted that as one. But nevertheless, like, again, sorry reviewing it, at the time and place that we are, but there it is.
Mr. Potter is the modern day hero in this film. According to Jimmy Stewart, George Bailey's dead. He is
Yes.
the old ideal of America.
Your
Mr.
time has
Potter is
passed.
the new ideal.
Yeah.
Mr. Potter is Gordon Gekko. Mr. Potter is Donald Trump. Mr. Potter is all those kind of businessmen.
Rumsfeld. Anyone you want to name there.
Yeah, Dick Cheney. Anyone you want. But he has become the ideal for that kind of American
Rockefeller.
capitalism.
I was talking about the XP for Rockefeller, kind of like Mr. Burns style.
Yeah, Mr. Burns even. But there is another one that I actually think they may have intended, which I think it's an interesting interpretation. So this is right after World War II, where a lot of people were coming back from a war with nothing, in a way,
Sure.
having sacrificed all of their youthful dreams and all of like their major plans to go serve their community and country. And I think it's important that George Bailey didn't go to the war, but his brother did. And his brother came back a hero. Because it's not a war story. It's about the sacrifice that goes
Everyone
into
made.
a war.
Sure.
And when I was thinking about it as I was watching the movie, I thought that if it was the intention of this film to give a cathartic kind of release
Spiritual
to that
comfort
generation,
to America. Yeah.
I think it struck that chord very well.
Right.
And granted, that might be a reason we feel it's saccharine now, is because that shared collective sacrifice doesn't exist in our time when it did back then.
Honestly, I think that was one of the stronger points of the movie was the showing of what everyone was pitching in during wartime. And there were a ton of films glorifying war heroes and people coming back from war, but this glorified the people that stayed home, which I thought was interesting.
Well, sure. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
And I don't know. There are probably a few other themes in this, but I think that is a really important one.
But I think it's also saying that, like, it's the filmmakers and saying, I understand your sacrifice.
Yeah.
I understand your pain. I understand the tragedies that have befallen you. And yet, like, even when things look the bleakest, again, it is a war, it's a after war pro-America feel, but trying to heal. So
Sure.
I respect it for that.
Yes, but here, let me propose somewhat of rebuttal. In case anyone's unfamiliar, this is a Frank Capra movie. Capra made a number of American propaganda films at the end of the day. Like, and sure, yes, perhaps that was the intent. Maybe that was like needed. Maybe Hollywood or whoever was like, listen, we're in a wake of World War II. People are kind of feeling out of sorts, disenfranchised, perhaps. Make something for the masses that will make them feel better about it and about themselves. And also release it around Christmas time or whatever. The thing is, and I think this is a line from Chris on a podcast from last season, you can like it, doesn't make it not a propaganda film for that. But if that was the intent, like I absolutely am certain that Capra made it with that intent because that's sort of what he did, then yeah, it gets it across. But like you said, viewing it now in modern times, is it effective? All right, I guess I'll give the film credit because that was, to me, seemingly its intent and did do that. Whether or not it affected me, of course, spoiler, it didn't. But nevertheless, sure.
You're not the audience.
Yeah, exactly. You're right. So I may give it a soft one just based on the strength of that. I like that argument, even though, of course, I want to hate on this movie as much as I can. I might give it credit on that front.
Well, I could say that I will probably be being a hypocrite for giving obvious propaganda film. Although I don't know if it's...
See, that's the thing. It's American propaganda, so it's not like in favor of any one thing. It's in favor of coming together as America after we've just fought a brutal war.
The propaganda plus the prescient economic view.
Perhaps unintentional, though, but even so.
I'll have to give it a 1. Maybe not a strong 1, but a 1.
I will say this, I'm not going to give my vote on themes yet because I'm not exactly sure where I'm going to land on it, but I will say that this movie, yes, while a product of the times, was basically what everybody in, I don't know, quote unquote, I guess PC culture or whatever the hell you want to call it, complains about today. It's a movie about white dudes for white dudes and against everybody
like
else.
I said,
pretty
it's
much
set in Norman Rockwellville.
You know, like George treats women like shit the entire time. There's, I think, 2 black characters in it, and they're both servants.
But that's how it was in America back then.
I guess
so. You would think.
I mean, yeah. Like I said, it's a product of its time, but it certainly wasn't going out on any limbs to try and be inclusive of anyone else. That's for sure.
Neither was America.
That's true.
So
maybe still not.
So maybe again, I know you're saying it's kind of tricky. It's kind of weird to sort of like shadow that line.
But yeah, I think if you go back and watch most old movies will be in similar veins. But,
even movies nowadays are still kind of.
Yeah,
so I'm just
that's
saying.
true.
Check out our Oscar.
But I will. I think I will
give
give Themes a soft one for that kind of like post-war feel, that post-war theme that and the everybody pitching in to make America, awesome again
Great
or
again.
whatever.
What'd you give us, Scott?
I'm giving it an okay one, a solid one.
All right, it's on to antagonist with Mr. Ramosi.
I guess the antagonist is Potter.
Money. Sorry.
Money embodied
Yeah,
by
all right.
Potter.
Yeah, exactly. I like that. Go on.
He is basically just walking cash. And he, you know what? Of everybody in this film, despite so I feel like every time that he's not on screen, he's a much more daunting nemesis. Every time he's on screen, I feel like he should have a mustache so he can be twirling it.
He might as well. He's twirling his money.
But I think
His mustache is made of money,
the
too.
specter of Potter throughout this movie is pretty strong, and he just is there the whole damn time, looming over. I think I like him as an antagonist. It's so strange that we're talking about it being pro-American propaganda too, because this movie is fairly anti-capitalism.
But it's pro small community,
Sure.
which I think has lost a lot of its
Right, like we
weight
said.
in America today.
Mm-hmm.
But definitely did have an impact back then.
Well, that's the issue. Like we said, as we said multiple times now, you can't help but escape when it was made versus how we're viewing it now. So it's going to obviously color our opinions versus what perhaps people at the time thought of it.
But I think that Mr. Potter is an antagonist for the ages.
Sure,
you
he's
could have had
Scrooge.
him
Yeah, same thing. Yeah, you're
in
right.
the 1800s. You could have
Yeah.
had him
Yeah.
in the 30s. You could have him today. And he works very well. And you said he's mustache twirling occasionally, but I feel that I like what you said when you say he's more daunting when he's not on screen. Because I feel that he is perhaps one of the more complex characters in this. Yes, he has
I
one
agree.
single motivation, but he tries multiple methods of beating George Bailey. I understand where he's coming from, and I don't hate him for what he's attempting to do. I just disagree with what what his motives are. And I like that as a villain, and the fact that his shadow is large, and not only because he's a large man, is
Even though he's in a wheelchair, he's a Big Lebowski sort of.
Yeah.
I'm going to give him a solid one.
I'll probably do the
I'm gonna
same.
give it a 1 as well.
And I think you guys are right. Yeah, like I actually do like that as well, Steve. His specter is more antagonistic than the man himself in person, but nevertheless, you're right. Like he sort of is ever prevalent in people's lives in this town. So I'll give him a 1.
Okay, and on to protagonist with Scott.
Oh well, thanks, Mr. Manzer. George Bailey, of course, played by Jimmy Stewart, making one of one faces in this movie. So, yeah, like we said, so we've danced around this a little bit. Sure, he's set up to be like your average, like good old boy, everyman, suburban American, white guy, I guess. You know, your good old kid. Works at the local drugstore as a kid and saves, the old drunken owner from, accidentally poisoning somebody. And then has big dreams to become an architect or whatever it was, engineer, architect, build things, build an airstrip, and then gets sucked right into the town. But here's the thing I want to point out, right? And then we said, yeah, he can be kind of a dick, and often is here and there. He feels resentful, and maybe rightly so, for being forced to, feeling trapped to be in Bedford Falls. And sure, he helps people, he gives it, when the run on the bank happens, he gives out money. But I want to point something else and something else out, and this may come in the secondary. Early on, when, he is coming home from his brothers from Harry's high school graduation party. He strolls home with Mary, and I just had this, I had to write this down when I was watching the film. He goes, "Well, how old are you now?" And she tells him 18. "Oh, 18, good. Now it's not creepy, like just to be sure." And like for audiences alike, it's wholesome because he's 18. And then he accidentally steps on the trailer of a bathrobe or something because of shenanigans. They were in the pool in his school and now walking home in borrowed clothes or whatever. And then she has to hide in a bush because she's now naked. And he's like, "Oh, you want the robe back? I don't know if I'm going to do it." Fuck you. You'd get fucking arrested right now if you tried that shit. If anything like it happened, she would "This isn't funny anymore. I'm calling the cops now." And then lo and behold, the cop shows up, but his father has died. All this shit. So I will say this. I finally, the only time I ever enjoy him as a protagonist is when he finally like breaks and snaps and he starts snapping at his family like years later, right after he loses the money and he can't find it. He goes home in like a tiff and he's like, nothing's wrong. Like he's finally sort of angry and snaps at his family and then realizes that they're not like afraid of him. So of course he goes off as any true-blooded American male would do to the bar to have a couple of drinks. Well, I guess suicide's the only option now. I'm gonna jump off the bridge in town. So, like, yeah, I don't know. Like, again, of course, like we said, thematically, and Capra's director, etc., and the script, they want you to sympathize with him. He's supposed to represent something, like we said, like the healing, the good guy who helps out in the town, even not necessarily like helping out in the war, etc. All this crap. But again, he comes off as buffoonish at times and dickish at worst. So I don't know.
It seems to me that George Bailey is the main character with the least agency I have ever seen over his own life.
And perhaps because of the setup.
He literally can do nothing that he wants to do.
Mm-hmm.
He finds it impossible to do anything that he actually wants to do.
Fate conspires against him. But yeah, you're right about that, for sure.
And every time he just has to convince himself that he's happy with what he's got. Because that's all he's got, because he can't get away.
Sorry, not fate. God.
Yeah, well, I knew you were going to say that, and that's rightly so, pointed out.
But yeah, it's so brutal how he does nothing. He gets caught up in the same cycle over and over and over again, and even at the end, when he wants to be mad at everything for conspiring against him, he ends up being happy. He can't even be angry about his lot in life.
Yeah, well, now he's realized he loved life. So like the thing that was funny to me, and I think I referenced it earlier, but when he comes back and he knows that Potter has called in the warrant for his arrest, and he shows up at his house, and like the cop and the banker guy, oversight guy are there, and like, well, he has something for you, Mr. Billy. He goes, oh, I bet it's a warrant for my arrest. I'm going to jail, everybody. Isn't that great? Like, he just grates on me, and like this, as a microcosm, as this whole movie does. So again, I understand the intent of the film originally, and again, like we mentioned numerous times, the sensibilities of what it's trying to impart. However, I do not have to like him as a protagonist. And I do not.
So I have a number of issues. One being Jimmy Stewart, who a fine actor. He reminds me of Tom Hanks quite a bit.
Well, go see
someone
him.
else. I really
he's probably a Tom Hanks of his time. That's really funny.
But I mentioned this earlier. He is impulsive. And yeah, he doesn't have any agency, but I feel like the only thing he has in his life is a chess match with
God.
Mr. Potter.
Yeah.
Who is God? It might as well be.
Yeah. The economic god of this community. And it seems that he does things out of spite. And the only enjoyment he gets is
sticking it to the man sometimes, but then doesn't.
Yeah, I want to see the future of George Bailey because
after Potter dies, and he doesn't have he's just a broken man without a villain.
He just becomes Potter.
Yeah,
like that's
we all become what we must dislike.
Potter was once a young Jimmy Stewart, and then he won the battle, and then he grew bitter and created. So it's gonna be Baileyville next. There's a lot about this character that just like his nepotism, the fact that he makes poor decisions constantly that could be avoided, and everything is, you kind of always get the feeling that he's existing by the skin of his teeth.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, he gets saved this one time, but he's either going to become Mr. Potter or either going to be at that bridge again sometime near in the future.
Yes.
And it's tragic in a way they didn't mean it to be tragic.
Exactly. And I might not necessarily blame Jimmy Stewart for being a bad actor in this film, but I mean, he was working with what he was given, and in his own mannerisms and style as well. But yeah, you're right. Like just narratively, he's a poor protagonist. So I'm gonna give him a 0.
Yeah, I agree. I'm gonna also give him a 0, but I do want to quickly. Actually, you know what? Let's keep going, and then I'll see what I want to say.
All right,
later.
it's on to supporting with me, which there are supporting characters I like in this work. There are some interesting people, but there are also the most infuriating people of all time cast in supporting roles. So I'm going to start with one vine, then I'm going to pass it off to Steve-O, and then on to Scott.
All right.
We'll all pick who we hate the most.
And a weird reversal of our tradition, yes.
Yeah. I'm going with Uncle Billy.
Damn it!
Who is
bad.
The most obnoxious, infuriating
He's the most incompetent one, I'll say.
Yeah.
I think my pick is going to be okay.
He's naive, but for some reason, Jimmy Stewart's to blame for this, and the actor himself and the character George Bailey. That for nepotism's sake, it's his uncle. He keeps him in the business. This guy is a known drunk and an absent-minded fool who has a pet crow. And
Pet Crow is the best
squirrel.
character. Yeah.
There's a squirrel in there.
There's one squirrel randomly. You're right about that.
Reason.
You're right.
And he is the impetus for probably a lot of the emotional drama in George Bailey's life. In particular, he is the direct cause for his suicide attempt. And all about like, oops, I like by sheer shenanigans.
Yeah.
I want to strangle this man alive. All right, on to Steve.
So I'm going to actually, Scott, you do yours first because I have two in mind.
All right.
Uncle, what was his name?
Uncle Billy was
Uncle
one of
Billy
yours, apparently.
was my
Yes.
first choice,
Right.
of course. I think you're going to take my second choice, but I'm going to let you do it,
All right.
and then I'll do the third one.
Well, mine is hee-haw, Sam, whatever his
no, you
fucking
didn't.
name is. Like the most, like again, I have the description in my notes of the entire secondary cast as a whole is just tinsel on a perfectly arranged Christmas tree. They're just there as decoration. They're every caricature ever. So that guy's the annoying friend in town who hits it big. Actually, he steals George's idea, if you guys recall.
Yeah.
To be clear. He's like, yo, I mentioned to my boss about your plastic growing out there, how to create a better plastic. He loved it. We're gonna do it. So,
Yeah.
and later,
that George gives to him as he's like making out with his girlfriend. So I guess all's fair in love and
yeah, I
war
guess whatever, but like,
and business.
it's just so fucking annoying. And like, of course, it's a running gag. Every time he shows up or talks to anybody, he has to punctuate it with 1,000 hee-haws. It's so fucking annoying. And it's just, they grate on me. Like, again, they're sort of representative of the grating things about this film to me.
I just want to make one comment about that because I would forget that he haws. And then he would do it. Like he'd show up and then randomly do it and be like, God damn it!
Yeah, he was never not going to keep doing it in every scene he appears. So, so anyway, so go ahead, Steve. Well, that's mine. What's yours?
So I guess I'm going to go with Mary, his
Mhm.
wife, because there is zero reason she should have been in love with him.
Because there's no one else left in town.
He immediately treats her like shit when they're kids. He calls her brainless or something.
Yep.
And then he continues to do it throughout the entire movie.
Yes.
He treats her like crap, and she's like so madly, wildly in love with him that it doesn't matter at all. And it's really frustrating to me the entire time.
And if he was never born, she would end up alone.
Yeah,
For
she
some
would be a librarian.
As a nice mousy
Yeah.
librarian. What's wrong with that?
So what happened to Sam in this version where he never...
I think they said that he died too in the war. Like a number of people died in the war because he wasn't alive somehow, or because maybe they were in
it was
Harry's
that was
unit.
that whole platoon. That was that whole.
I don't
boat
know.
full of
They said
soldiers or
something
whatever.
bad happened to him. Like, of course, I just don't remember exactly the specifics.
Anyway, yeah, she ends up a lonely librarian because he's not around. Of course.
Sure. Actually, I have one more. I think this is one of the better characters, if I can say that, relatively. I think her name is Violet, like the sort of like other girl in town who's like the town flirt, if you will.
Yeah.
Like, I kind of liked her, but she's basically a gold digger. Again, a caricature.
And she doesn't do like. There's no point to her being in the movie.
Except for being a caricature. Yeah.
She's not even. Like,
She's another strand of tinsel on the fucking tree of this movie, dude.
She's not
Like,
even a viable like opponent to marry. You know, like a love interest.
She has two character plot lines.
oh, yeah,
that
that's
are
right. She
established.
fucking leaves town. Yeah, that's right.
She leaves town and then comes back immediately.
Yeah. Yep.
And then she also was briefly set up as that the town thought that George was having an affair with
Yes.
Yeah, but that never went anywhere
her.
either.
Exactly. Neither of them went anywhere.
Yeah.
So, like, there are some good characters. I liked a lot of the random townsfolk that were, like, giving, like, wild expressions at different shenanigans. The bartender and...
Nick and Martini. Yeah.
Yeah, like, a number of those were, like, neat little... But the amount of
Bert and Ernie?
obnoxious... Yeah. Like, they fit this world very well.
Yeah.
Sure. Your fake
kids
plastic tree world, I guess.
Yes. But the amount of, like you said, decorations on a tree. There are some fitting decorations on the tree, and then there's these just garish,
Gaudy,
obnoxious,
distasteful things, yeah.
I'm like,
tacky shit.
Why'd you
Yeah.
add this to the film? So I mean,
Yeah.
I have to give this a very strong 0.
I just want to put out that, like, we never mentioned Clarence, but I guess he's technically the angel without his wings. He's there, though.
Sort of.
So you guys think that God and then Joseph count as supporting characters in the fucking film?
I'll give them a 0.
And they're
for
definitely
sure.
getting zeros,
Yeah.
sure. So anyway, you heard my thoughts.
I didn't mind Clarence. I thought he was fine for what he was like. The actor did a fine job for what he was given, and it wasn't the worst role in the movie by far.
It's also, he's on screen for a surprisingly little amount of time.
Yeah. Oh my god, I was like an hour and a half into this movie. I was like, when the hell does the angel? Because I haven't seen it in like a decade either. I was like, when the hell does the damn angel show up?
Like they're having conversations, but he never actually shows up in person, if you will, until the bridge scene. So 0.
Yeah, I'm gonna stick with it. We also didn't mention Ma and Pa Bailey.
Whatever, they're there.
They were all right, I suppose. But there were some really obnoxious supporting characters.
And then the really racist servant.
Yeah.
But
no, racist portrayal. She's not racist herself, but yes.
That's true.
She was not racist, correct.
The script calls for her to be portrayed in such a way.
Anyway, onto dialogue with Stephen.
It's very obvious that it is a product of its time. I don't want to say it's bad dialogue. In fact, there are a couple of witty things throughout the movie.
Name one. I'm being serious. Like, what did you think was witty? There's
a whole like dialogue that he has his mother when he's about to go meet Mary. I thought that was all right. I thought it was fairly like his grunting towards her at first, and then she calls him out on it, and then he kind of starts talking to her about his actual feelings. Like, it was a way to bring out his actual feelings on the matter that wasn't like super obvious or annoying. I don't know. There were a couple other things I can't remember off the top of my head at the moment. It's not like it was great dialogue,
all right.
But it wasn't. It was serviceable, I thought. There are always those moments in this movie that stick out just because you've heard them a million times on everything that riffs off of it. But I don't know. I honestly want to hear what you guys think about it. I'm probably edging towards a 0, but let's see what you guys say.
See, the issue is that this is such a well-known piece that I can't judge how great how well implemented some of the dialogue was, because I've seen this movie before, but not only that, it's you've heard a lot of the dialogue or versions of it that are making fun of it. But you're right, there are some humorous moments to this, and I'm trying to think of. You said to point out witty things. I'm asking you, Scott. Can you point out any particularly cringeworthy dialogue?
Yes,
in this?
like all of it. That's going to be my point. So you go finish, and then I'll speak.
See, that's the thing is, I guess you and I are going through this with a different perspective, because I found it a product of its time, and I didn't find anything like, especially introduction. Perhaps there were some things that were over the top, but I think for the most part, it was okay for what it was, and some funny moments, and I'm leaning towards like a soft 1 for this.
Like, yeah, I guess my point is like, yes, I understand they're supposed to be funny, but again, it's the problem of time, in hindsight, I suppose, as we mentioned like numerous times now, and I'm trying to keep it separate, but there's a point in which I cannot. So like a lot of it to me is like clipped and weird and fake, because like they want to have like a humorous moment, but then like serious conversation. For example, when George goes to see Mary, when he comes back, she's like, "What'd you come in for?" I don't know. I'm leaving right now. No, wait, don't leave. And then the phone rings, and like something separate happens. Like it's so like it's like weirdly forced to me to keep the plot going along, even though like it doesn't all necessarily flow together. And I never particularly laughed ever, and certainly not this time. Again, I understand that these are supposed to be sort of humorous, jokey situations, and even when the drama comes in, but even then, it's almost like, I'm trying to think, we referenced this in a recent-ish cast, it's almost like Network, where it's almost like a play-style dialogue, except it's so obviously that I can't escape that. Like, I gotta speak like this. Oh, what? Oh, what direction? Like, it's weird. Like, oh, hey there, George. Oh, how you doing? Like, it's so unnatural, even though, like, what they're saying, I believe that people would be saying at the time. I guess, the cadence of it is just off-putting to me. And I cannot name for you any, like I said, Steve-O, name one witty thing or something that you thought was like a standout quote. I certainly cannot. I don't think any of them are. And I just felt so, if nothing else, it's boring to me. It almost becomes background noise. And that's the worst thing I can say about it. Like, the worst offensive thing about it to me.
There are certainly quotes in this movie that you'll recognize and you'll know. Anybody will.
Yeah, I'll know them, but I don't have to like think they're good. You know what I mean?
But I think that, and possibly what's going to put me over the top is, I think I'm leaning more towards the 1 now. Actually, is a couple of the speeches that he gives are actually fairly good. Like the one in the bank where he's talking to everybody is like, he's talking about, oh well, your money's not here; it's at his house, it's at Joe's house, and Joe's money is at Mary's house, and when he's going through when they're doing that,
no, I get it, but
when they're actually talking about the issues that are being raised in the movie, I think the dialogue does a fairly good job of of doing that.
Maybe, but that's like 20% at most of the movie. Like, I know we argue about like the mathematics of all this, how it cuts up, like, I'll say Arrival or something like that. But all I'm saying is my personal like gut reaction to it is a 0.
My personal gut reaction to it is to give it the benefit of the doubt for the time and the place. And I think that the segments that I liked outweighed the segments that I despised. So
Well, I'm completely the opposite. So,
yeah, so I'm going to give it a soft 1.
Yeah, I think I'm going to stick with Ian on this one. I'm also going to give it a soft 1.
solid 0, if not hard, but definitely 0.
All right.
All right, it's onto style with Scott.
So this is the one thing about this film I can possibly give credit for, because Frank Capra, yes, is a good director. He knew how to make films. And also, it still looks pretty good. It's always like, not necessarily the point of it, but a lot of the shots are in like sort of moonlit, half shadow. That's kind of noirish, and I'm always going to kind of like that regardless. But I mean, just in general, the town looks fine, looks believable. All the little sets they had were fine. Yeah, the shots, again, were framed perfectly, blocked, etc. very well. So I think I can give, if nothing else, I'll give it credit on being a well done, artistically speaking movie. You know, it was professionally made by filmmakers and people who knew how to make films.
I will give this movie full credit on the cinematography.
Yes.
The sound design, and granted, this is probably another product of the time, was annoying as hell.
Well, it could have been the version you watched, but sure.
Just even so, I even remember this from, watching it back in the day, but there's so many points where it's hard to understand what people are saying because there's other stuff going on, and whatever, microphones they had at the time just pick up everything.
Sure.
And they had obviously no way of dialing certain things back and, pushing certain things up. So that kind of grated on me a little bit, but overall, I thought it was a really well shot movie.
Yes.
And I have to give it credit for that.
So there's two universes in this movie. One is the one where Judge Bailey exists. One is where he doesn't exist, which sounds a lot more complex and interesting than it actually turns out to be.
Yes.
But you see certain characters in different fates and in different,
interpretations.
No
kind
one
of
ages in this movie, which is really rare. They actually have one line in there where he's like, "Oh, you look the same as when I left." Oh, no one ever ages.
Technically, it takes place over the course of George's 30-year life or whatever. Yes. But everyone, Mr. Potter's never ages, etc.
24 years at minimum of how long this movie took place over.
Potter is a vampire.
Yeah.
Well, Uncle Billy.
He might as well be.
Doesn't age at all. But you see certain, they're distinctly different, but still recognizable, and you can actually see how the timelines, where the timelines diverged and how they became who they were, which I felt was very, very well done. I don't know about soundtrack much at all for this.
It was fine. I mean, it was there, and I think it matched the scenes of what was happening, whether dramatic or comedic.
Yeah.
But I liked when they went to Pottersville versus when they went.
Bifftown.
Biff. And seeing how I actually thought it was more well done because it felt like a transformation of the place. Where Biff was a whole new city on top of that. So I have to give it credit for that. I'm going to give Style a 1 for that. And also, it is great at manipulating your emotion in the end scene, as I mentioned before.
Yeah. Or at least trying to. But yeah, I mean, if nothing else, I certainly give credit on this front, and we'll give it a 1.
I will agree with that. So 1's all around for that one.
Okay, so it's recommendations, starting with me. Yes, this is a classic movie. It's not great. It's not terrible, in at least my opinion. And it's something that, if you're an American, it's classic for a particular reason, and it's worth at least one watch. So I'm going to give it a soft 1, but a 1 nonetheless.
To some extent, I agree with you, Ian. Honestly, I don't think this warrants
the ranking it has.
I don't think this warrants 2 watches. No, it definitely does. Well,
okay.
To me, it definitely doesn't.
That's what I thought you were going to say. Go on.
Doesn't warrant the ranking that it has. The 20th best film of all time or American film of all time is crazy to me. But yeah, it is a classic, and I think honestly, if you have never seen it, you probably should watch it at least once, just so you know a little something about what films were about from that time, from around that time, and where the American headspace was. I think this does a good job of putting that onto celluloid and getting it out there. I don't think it's a great movie, but I think you'd be remiss not watching it at least once.
Maybe.
So I guess I'll recommend it if you haven't seen it yet.
I guess the issue is sort of like, if you haven't seen this movie, who the fuck, like, who hasn't seen it? Like, maybe people younger than us have been as exposed to it, throughout the course of their childhoods. Almost anyone else probably has at least heard of it and seen it. But again, even me, I never enjoyed it growing up, and I would say, no, like, watch Howard and Kumar's Christmas or something, like anything else. I don't know. Yes, my hatred of this movie is shining through, but I can't help it. And I absolutely agree. I have no idea in the world how it made number 20. Sure, maybe it's culturally significant for us in terms of films, in terms of the culture that encapsulated it when it was made. I don't think it deserves that much of a spot. Like, you just put it down back by Ben-Hur at number 99 or whatever. But
shouldn't even be on the list.
What?
Shouldn't be on the list.
If it's going to be, it should be very, very low. But I agree that it could be taken off, and I'd have no problem with that. If someone said to me, "Hey, want to watch a Christmas movie?" Oh, sure, which one? It's on the left. Nope, go fuck yourself. We're no longer friends. I don't know why I'm talking to you. I don't want to watch it. So I don't know. Like, that's my very colored opinion about it. And like, I would never have watched it again unless the only reason I did is because we were doing this review.
So to be clear, that's a 0.
Yeah, if that wasn't clear, it's a motherfucking 0 for my own movie.
Okay, so our review is done, and I'll read out the scores. I gave it a 6. Steve will get a 5, and the curmudgeonly old Mr. Potter himself, Scott Thurlow, gave it a 3.
I'm going to buy the AFI, and then I'll take it off. You'll see, Bailey.
Giving an aggregate score of a 4.66. So, in conclusion, for whom the bell tolls, it tolls for Clarence. I'm Jonathan E. Manser, here with Stephen Ramosi.
Have a good night.
And Scott Thurlow.
And every time you listen to our podcast, something that is actual existing in reality does something cool. I'm going to re-record that line.
We hope you've enjoyed your stay.
MOTSterpiece Theater.
Join us again next time, won't you?
MOTSterpiece Theater.
Music and editing by Chris Morgan.
MOTSterpiece Theater.
Editing and engineering by Stephen Ramosi.